What is up, everyone? Today I'm going to be talking about relative items that are relative to each other, and I'm going to use food and health in this instance. Now, it can be applied to other stuff, although I feel like it does get gray and you might extrapolate things wrong and go overboard if you use other areas, but I'm going to define it in terms of health and food and fitness. Mainly just food, though. So, in our modern society, because of how we are able to gather resources to create food and sugar and fats, um, we are now in a state of abundance of food. When you walk into any convenience store, which is so easy to get to, that's why they call them convenience stores, you have shelves and shelves of candy that are packed with sugar and soda bottles that have more sugar in that one bottle than you're supposed to intake for an entire day. Just shelves and shelves of that available for you to purchase at fairly convenient prices. And this overabundance leads to generally a obese population. And why does this happen? Why is everyone just prone to naturally eating more sugars and more of these foods than they should? And the reason is because this advent in all this accessibility is a relatively short blip in the map in terms of our human population and our human species as a whole when you consider the evolutionary rate that we evolve. So for tens and hundreds of thousands of years, sugar has been a scarce quality. You may not stumble across a good amount of sugar or fat for many weeks, which is why our genetics are still programmed to love sugar and go to it if you ever find it, because it's very rare and you need it to survive, and it doesn't come along for many weeks. Whether it's because you only get it if you manage to bag that animal you've been hunting for many days, or because it takes many weeks worth of searching to find that tree or that bush that has some sugary fruit. So that's what I'm saying in a nutshell. This mismatch in what we have now has caused our genetics, which can't evolve as quickly, to be inundated with all this stuff, which leads to us just being overstimulated, and that leads to a sort of numbness and stimulation, because you won't get the same level of pleasure that you would have first gotten from that first bite of candy after the 1,000th or 10,000th chocolate bar in your lifetime. And I know I said that really weird. 1,000th. So it works the same way for sugary foods or fast food like Burger King, McDonald's, or soda like Sprite or Coca-Cola. And to add insult into injury, a lot of businesses are profiting from this, and so they, depending on a business, you can't point fingers. Some of them will use their money to market and exploit human psychological tendencies and genetics to get you to eat more and more, because they make more money from this, and they'll do it so that you associate, oh, this is so good, it feels so good, and then you eat more. And they exploit it with commercials, marketing, sales, a lot of psychological biases if they're smart enough to consider using them. A lot of companies, even big ones, aren't, but some do, with stuff like association bias. That could be something like putting this sugary, unhealthy drink and associate it with something that you trust or you like, or something like that. And on and on and on, which leads you to ultimately become unhealthy. And that's generally what happens in most of society, and diet does a lot to them. Not saying that there's probably also people who have great diets and are still obese, and that really, you can add on fitness and exercise to that. But generally, diet is a huge thing. So what am I saying with all this? With all this overstimulation of fats, foods, sugars, your taste buds, your tongue, um, can't achieve that same level of satisfaction or happiness that you would if you had gone 10 years without it and eaten your first bite of chocolate. And so because of that, that constant stimulation leads to a decreased sense of stimulation over time because of that redundancy. And therefore we get into that state, that whole idea of relativeness. Um, and a lot of things are relative. A lot of people like to say everything's relative. I don't know about that, but a lot of things are relative. And therefore, what you can do is to slowly use baby steps to slowly step away from being inundated with all these fast foods, if that's your standard already. So whatever your standard is, maybe you're not as bad and you're eating somewhat healthy, but occasionally you eat fast food. Wherever you set your current standard at, just naturally, you want to set a goal to where you want to be, and generally that's a certain level of healthy eating. And you might have to do some research on exactly where you want to get to, and don't believe the myth that there are no healthy foods that taste good. And I'll expand this even more as I get into this. So you want to start making baby steps to slowly change from those healthy diets. So what I mean is that day by day, week by week, you make small changes. And the reason is because if you make huge changes, it's going to be too much for you to handle. And studies have shown that willpower is like a battery. It drains your energy if you keep trying to exercise it, which makes you tired and less focused and have no energy if you're constantly exercising it. So if you go too far and you take too big leaps, which I have learned from experience, you will end up relapsing because it's just too much. If you go from eating fast food every day to trying to eat nothing but salads for the next week and you want to continue that forever, guarantee you at some point you will break, and then you have your cheat meal, which ends up being a cheat binge, which ends up undoing all the stuff that you accomplished and even more. So it's like one step forward, two steps back. So what you want to do is take baby steps. The saying goes, if you put a frog in hot water, he'll jump right out. But if you put a frog in lukewarm water and slowly turn up the temperature over time, he'll not realize it and slowly die when the water's boiling. So it's the same side, that's kind of a horrible analogy, but the idea is if you use small baby steps, you won't notice it as bad and it won't hurt as much and you won't relapse. And obviously, sometimes you would just there's two ways of doing it. You make so subtle small baby step movements that you don't notice it, and if you do this over an extended period of time, those changes will be so small that in the short run you won't notice, in the long run it will be huge leaps. The other way is to do a little bit more every day or every week on a short term, and then every whatever cycle you're using every week, you do a cheat meal. That also works for some people. And again, how much that cheat meal should be is that's for yourself to figure out, and there's plenty of articles from reputable experts on that online. Just Google it. However, so what you will find is, and this gets back to the whole point of everything's relative, is the fact that if you ever get to the state where you are, in a healthy diet, or have just experienced a period of time where you have cut back tremendously, or you just look at people who have for the most of their life been very healthy. For their standard, anything that's above that level creates the same stimulus for their taste buds and their how they taste and feel in terms of satisfaction of a food as you would for a much larger increase. So what am I saying about this is somewhat abstract. If you take a man who has been on a fasting regiment for a week. Maybe he hasn't eaten any food, and has drank minimal water for a week. The first bite of food he eats is going to be much more stimulating than that man who's eaten Burger King and fast food and candy every single day of his life, 3 times a day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. That man, that's the latter man, can rarely ever experience that level of stimulation. So again, this applies to a lot of areas in life. Sometimes you have to step back or switch it up in order to create that same level of stimulus. And at least in the terms of food and dieting, you can do so, and it ends up being a healthy and more beneficial thing to do also. And again, I'm not recommending you go all extreme and do something like don't drink water for 3 days and then take your first sip of water. But again, that's a good case study as well. If you do that, if you don't, think of the guy who is stranded in the desert and is trying to escape, and like after 3 days of trekking, he finally hits a civilization, and he finally drinks his first sip of water after 3 days, and he's a skeleton. And he drinks this because he's so gulped from not drinking anything, and he's all skin and bones. That water is going to be the most beautiful drink to him, much more stimulating, more satisfying than any soft drink or soda or any other beverage will ever give you the rest of your life. And so you have to sort of realize that and cut back the stimulation. And I realized this with soda and carbonated beverages and sugary drinks, and it is very true. And I feel like I'm a lot healthier for it. And I'm not saying I'm perfect. I still appreciate my Sprite and my soda from time to time, but I can often, especially when it's summertime or I've exercised a lot, as people have said before, nothing tastes as good as water to a human when he is thirsty beyond belief. And I think that's so true. And so again, everything is relative, and therefore you probably might want to consider at least cutting back to achieve that level. And again, the same thing happens with foods, fast foods. For instance, if a man fasts and doesn't eat any food, or just sticks to healthy food for a long period of time, just salad, greens, a very non-fat meats, whatever, and then all of a sudden one day he eats something as simple as a blueberry, that can erupt huge amounts of stimulation in their mouth, equivalent to a sugary candy bar or sugary drink. And the reason is because it's relative, because for such a long time he's cut back on a stimulation, and his standard is more akin to the standard that most of the human species has been living closer to for the last 100,000 years of our history. Because of that blueberry with that sugar in it is just so amazing to them, and you get so much stimulation in your mouth. And again, it's not just theory. A lot of these things I'm pulling from real case studies that I'm just cutting down the time and not mentioning. The latest thing with the blueberry was actually from an entrepreneur. He said how he had considered this, realized this, and what he did was he stopped eating unhealthy foods, went to just healthy foods for about a week, and then something as simple as a blueberry was the most satisfying thing he'd ever eaten. So again, it's very interesting, and I think having the right knowledge, which I've just I don't want to be so arrogant as to say it's the right knowledge, but having the right knowledge is very important, and I feel like this knowledge, if nothing else, may at least make you think and do some research and gather the right knowledge and figure out, hey, maybe there is something I can do. And obviously, don't go overboard immediately. I've learned from experience that baby steps is much better, because if you cut back too much and live in too much of a frugal lifestyle to what you're used to, you will eventually, sooner or later, relapse and just take two steps back. And this is not just with food, it's with personal finances too. If you're just too frugal, and I feel like most people are the opposite right now, they spend too much, but if you ever get to a state where you're too frugal with your money and you never spend a dime, and it takes a lot of willpower to do, you could relapse again also. So baby steps, that's all we want to say. If you found this video useful, share it with your friends, share with someone you think would be benefited with this on any sort of form of social media or email. Leave a comment if you want, and let me know if you have any opinions, anything you want to say, if you want to thank me, anything in the comments below. And let me know if you watched this entire video from start to finish, which is quite amazing because a lot of people skip out after the first minute or so. As always, like, favorite, comment, subscribe. I will see you in my next video. Thanks for watching.